The cabin was silent, save for the shallow gasps of a woman in labor and the low whistle of wind squeezing through the crooked window pane. Shadows from the hearth fire danced across the rough timber walls, flickering over the face of Mary Harland as she gritted her teeth against the next wave of pain. Sweat rolled down her temples, her auburn hair clinging to her cheeks. There was no midwife, no gentle hand to wipe her brow, only the raw isolation of the frontier and a world shrunk down to the agony of childbirth. She screamed, a rag stuffed between her teeth to stifle the sound, not because of modesty, but because Jed didn't like loud noises. It riled him. He'd said so more than once, especially when the whiskey spoke louder than he did. Mary bore down, muscles burning, and felt the shift inside her body. One more push, one more, and then silence, broken only by a sharp, wet cry. Her hands trembled as she pulled the child to her chest. A girl. Tiny, red, perfect. For a moment, everything paused. The pain, the fear, even the winter wind outside seemed to hold its breath. Mary cradled her newborn, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. Her heart surged with the kind of love she hadn't known she still had inside her. She thought, you and we're going to make it. The door slammed open. Jed's boots clomped in, mud frozen to the soles. The whiskey was already on his breath before she even looked up. He smelled like gun oil and failure. His eyes were bloodshot, and when they landed on her, they didn't soften. Well, he grunted, pulling his coat off with a snap. Mary lifted the baby slightly, her voice gentle. It's a girl. Silence. Then the scrape of a chair dragging back as Jed sat. His jaw clenched, thick brows pulling into a stormy knot. A girl, he repeated, as though she'd announced a miscarriage. That's what you give me. Mary's stomach clenched harder than any contraction had. She's healthy, Jed. Strong. I don't need another mouth to feed that ain't gonna plow a damn field or hold a rifle, he muttered, pulling out his knife and slicing into the heel of stale bread. He didn't offer her any. I wanted a son. I wanted our child to live, Mary said softly, without heat, without fear. Jed threw the bread to the floor and stood. You think this is enough, Mary? You think this is good news? 2 boys dead before they could walk, and now you give me a girl. He crossed the floor fast. Too fast. Mary tried to shield the baby as his hand came down, not a strike, but a snatch. He grabbed the bundle, pulling her away from Mary's chest. The baby wailed. Mary lunged, grabbing at his sleeve. Jed, no. He flinched like her touch was poison and shoved the child back into her arms. Get out. Both of you. Mary stared at him, blinking in disbelief. What? You heard me. Out of this house. Out of this life. You think I'm going to waste another winter feeding you and some squealing girl child? He grabbed her arm and yanked her to her feet, uncaring that blood still soaked her shift, that her legs trembled from hours of pain. Go live with the wolves if you want. I'm done. She stumbled. Jed, it's freezing, she'll die. He pushed her toward the door. That ain't my concern. The cold outside hit like a slap. Snow crunched beneath her bare feet. The moon lit the pine forest in eerie silver streaks. Mary held the baby tighter, wrapping her shawl as best she could around both of them. Behind her, the door slammed again, and with it, the last of her old life. She walked. There was no choice. Each step was a prayer that she wouldn't fall, wouldn't bleed out, wouldn't stop breathing. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed, but she kept moving. For her daughter. The child whimpered against her breast. Mary hummed a lullaby through chattering teeth, a song her mother used to sing when snow piled high against the windows and wolves howled in the distance. The same wolves were out tonight. She heard them. Long, echoing cries, somewhere past the ridgeline. Tree branches scratched at her face. Ice clung to her hair. Her feet went numb before they went raw. Still, she pressed forward. There was no destination, just away. From the man who'd once sworn to protect her. From the home that never really was. She remembered the first time she met Jed. He was charming then, lean and rugged, with eyes that spoke of freedom and wild places. She mistook solitude for strength. Mistook anger for passion. Mistook control for love. Now she understood better. The stars blurred as she stumbled over a root and fell to her knees, shielding the baby from the snow. She coughed, chest rattling. Her arms were weak. The edges of her vision trembled. If she stopped, she would die here. So would the child. But she couldn't go farther. Not like this. A branch cracked nearby. Mary froze. Her hand went instinctively to the small knife she had tied inside her shawl. A pitiful thing, more suited to peeling apples than fighting off predators. But it was all she had. Another sound, boots, hooves. She turned, heart hammering. A shape emerged from the trees. Tall, lean, on horseback. The moon caught silver on his braids and painted stripes on his painted face. He was not white, not a settler. He looked at her with unreadable eyes. Mary clutched the baby closer and raised the knife, though her hand shook violently. "If you've come to kill me," she croaked, "just let her live." The figure didn't move. Snowflakes settled on his shoulders, unmoving. His gaze dropped to the infant, then returned to Mary's. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. She collapsed back into the snow, shivering violently. Her lips were turning blue. The man dismounted slowly. Not a word spoken. He approached and knelt before her. His hand reached forward, not for her, but the baby. Mary flinched, then hesitated. He touched the child's cheek with 2 fingers. Warmth. A whisper in a language she didn't know. Then he looked into Mary's eyes and nodded. She exhaled. It wasn't surrender. It was something else. Trust, maybe. Or the last flicker of hope refusing to die. He stood, then bent and carefully lifted her in his arms, light as if she were nothing more than dried leaves. The baby stayed nestled between them. He carried them to the horse, adjusted the blankets, then mounted with them, held tight against his chest. Mary's head lolled against his shoulder. Her last thought before blackness took her was not fear, but strange, aching relief. They rode through the snow as the forest whispered secrets in the wind behind them. And for the first time in a long, long while, Mary didn't feel alone. Smoke curled in gentle spirals above her, rich with the scent of burning cedar and something unfamiliar, sweet, earthy. Mary opened her eyes slowly. The world was soft and strange. Animal hides lined the walls of the circular space. A fire cracked in the center, warming the space, casting gold over woven blankets and painted symbols. She tried to move. Pain rippled down her spine like fire. Her breath caught. A gentle coo beside her, her baby. Safe. Nestled in a hollow of furs. Her tiny chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. Mary reached out, touching her daughter's cheek. Alive. Still warm. Still breathing. You are awake. The voice was deep, measured. She turned her head and saw him. The man from the woods. He crouched near the fire, feeding thin strips of bark into the flames. His face was angular, solemn, marked by black paint across the bridge of his nose and down his jaw. His hair, long and braided, caught the firelight. You carried me. He didn't answer. She tried again. Why? He stirred the fire, then sat back on his heels. Because you were dying. She was crying. He nodded toward the baby. It was not a good sound. Mary swallowed. You speak English. Some. His tone was neither friendly nor hostile, just honest. My mother taught me before the soldiers killed her. She felt a sting of shame. I'm Mary, she said softly. He watched her in silence for a moment, then replied, Tapaloo. She mouthed it. Tapaloo. Her eyes drifted over the space again. Where are we? My people's winter camp. You are safe here. Safe. The word echoed in her bones like a promise she didn't dare trust. Outside the teepee, she could hear voices, men speaking in a tongue she didn't understand. Laughter, a horse whinnying in the cold. Not far beyond that, the whisper of wind through snow-laden pines. I need to go, she said suddenly, trying to sit up again. My husband, he might come after. Tapaloo's eyes hardened. The man who left you in the snow will not follow. He has already forgotten you. Mary stopped moving. She stared at him, unsure what part of her ached more, the truth in his words or the sting of how easily they came. You don't know him. I know his kind, Tapaloo said simply. He sees no value in life unless it speaks his name back. You were a vessel to him, not a person. She stared into the fire, trembling. Tapaloo reached for something, a wooden bowl, and offered it to her. It was warm, broth, seasoned with something she couldn't place. Her hands shook as she took it, but she drank anyway. You will stay here until you are strong again, he said. Mary's jaw clenched. I can't live here. I'm not Sioux. I don't belong. No one belongs to anything, he said, with a slight tilt of his head. Not in the wild. Not after what you have survived. His words lingered in the air, weighty and true. Later, she tried to walk. Her legs still buckled under her, but she insisted. Tapaloo didn't stop her. He watched, arms crossed, face unreadable. When she fell, a small figure shuffled over, an old woman with wiry silver hair and laugh lines like canyon cracks. White woman walks like bird with broken wing, the woman grinned, her English thick but understandable. She reached down and helped Mary up. Tapaloo introduced her. She is Akachita, my aunt. Akachita clicked her tongue, muttering something in her language. She took the baby from the bedding with surprising tenderness. Tiny thing. Strong lungs. Mary watched her cradle the infant, the old woman's calloused hands swaying gently as she hummed. The sight burned behind her eyes. She hadn't seen another person hold her baby with such care since never. The days that followed blurred between healing and learning. Mary listened more than she spoke. The Sioux around her carried themselves with a quiet dignity, their movements fluid, their language melodic. Children played in the snow. Men sharpened arrows, prepared hides. Women boiled herbs, told stories. Tapaloo rarely spoke unless necessary. But she noticed things. He always brought her extra water, checked the fire before leaving, left bits of food by the bedding. She began to ask questions. What does your name mean? Strong Wind. Were you always here? In these lands? No, he said. My people move with the seasons. This place only for now. He spoke in short answers. But slowly, the space between them shifted. One night, when the fire burned low and the world outside was wrapped in snow, she dared to ask more. Did you have children? He stared into the flames. A son. He died 2 winters ago. I'm sorry. I know. They didn't speak for a while. But the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that held understanding. Days passed. Mary grew stronger. Her daughter, now named Clara, thrived. The warmth, the milk, the quiet lull of safety had done what nothing else could. But outside their small bubble, trouble stirred. One morning, Tapaloo returned from a scouting trip with a stiff jaw and narrowed eyes. Riders came near the edge of camp. Mary stiffened. Who? White men. 4, maybe 5. Looking for something. She went pale. Jed. I did not see their faces, but one wore a blue coat with brass buttons. Griggs. Her voice was flat. Neighbor. He always looked at me like I was game he hadn't hunted yet. Tapaloo stared at her. Then they will come again. Fear twisted her gut. What do we do? They do not know where the camp is, he said, but they will follow tracks. The storm covered most, not all. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She lay beside her child, one arm draped protectively, listening to the wind batter the teepee. She thought about Jed, about Griggs, about the men who saw women as property and babies as burdens. She thought about her new shelter. How strange it was that kindness had come from someone she'd been taught to fear. She sat up and found Tapaloo outside, watching the sky. I won't let them take her, she said. Her voice was steady now. Even if it kills me. He looked at her. You are not the same woman I found in the snow. No, she died out there. Tapaloo nodded slowly, then let the new one live. The next morning, Akachita handed Mary a carved bone blade. You may never be Sioux, she said, but you are no longer prey. Mary held it, testing its weight. It was beautiful, deadly. She looked toward the trees, where danger would come. She wasn't ready, not truly. But she wasn't broken anymore either. That night, as she fed Clara and listened to the quiet hum of the camp settling in, She allowed herself to hope, for the first time, not just for survival, but for something beyond it. And far off in the pines, someone watched the smoke rise, tracking it, waiting. The winter had not ended yet. The first shot tore through the morning silence like a thunderclap, ripping a hawk clean out of the sky. Feathers fluttered downward, landing in the snow beside a startled child. The scream came next, not the child's, but his mother's, sharp, frantic warning. Then chaos erupted. Mary was already running before she understood what was happening. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she scooped up Clara and pressed the child against her chest. Outside the teepee, smoke rose in spirals, thick and black. Shouts echoed through the trees. Gunfire cracked again, closer this time. The unmistakable metallic echo of powder, igniting, filled the air like war drums. She turned and saw Tapala charging across the camp, bow in hand, arrows clenched between his fingers. His eyes locked on hers. He didn't slow. "Behind the ridge," he ordered, voice sharp. "With the child. Go." Mary didn't argue. The cold bit through her clothes as she ran, bare feet crunching snow. Clara whimpered against her chest. The ridgeline wasn't far, just past the tree line where the forest thickened. Behind her, more shots rang out. A teepee burst into flame. She dove behind a fallen log, cradling Clara beneath her, breath coming in ragged gasps. Her fingers found the bone blade Akachita had given her, tied to her belt. She'd never killed anyone, but if they found her, she would. For her daughter, she would. Over the ridge, men's voices rose, harsh, familiar. "There. Smoke's to the west. That's where they're holed up." Jed. Mary clenched her jaw, so tight her teeth hurt. Tapaloo had been right. Her husband had forgotten her, until someone else found her valuable. Now he and Griggs had come to collect her like lost property. And they brought others, ranch hands and cowards, who'd follow a rifle's lead if the reward was good enough. "They got women and kids in there," one man muttered. "And pigs got teeth," Griggs replied. "We ain't leaving empty-handed." A branch snapped behind her. Mary whirled, knife in hand. But it was Tapaloo. He crouched beside her, his breath ghosting in the cold. Blood streaked his sleeve, but he didn't slow. "They have rifles," he said. She nodded. 4, maybe 5. Coming from the south. "I counted 2 on the ridge already." "Jed?" she asked. "Yes." Mary swallowed. "What do we do?" He looked down at Clara, then at her. "We don't run." Mary had never seen his eyes so still, like pools frozen mid-tide. She didn't argue. She handed him Clara, knowing he would keep the baby safer than she could. She tied her hair back, tucked her blade into her belt, and stood. "I'll draw them into the pines," she said. Tapala's gaze didn't waver. "You're not a warrior." "No," she said, "I'm a mother." "That's worse." He didn't try to stop her. Mary slipped through the trees like a ghost, heart thundering. She moved fast, each footstep precise, each breath measured. She circled around the camp, flanking the intruders. Branches clawed at her arms. Snow muffled her steps. She spotted Griggs first. He was crouched near a tree stump, loading his rifle, grinning like a man at a poker table who thought he had the winning hand. Rage surged through her. She didn't feel afraid. Not anymore. Just focused. She crept closer. He looked up just in time to see her eyes. Mary lunged. The blade went deep into his side, under his ribs. He gasped, dropped the rifle. She pulled the knife free and struck again. He collapsed, gurgling. She backed into the trees before the others could react, blood pounding in her ears. Gunfire broke out again, closer now. Tapala's war cry rang across the clearing, sharp and high like an eagle's scream. It chilled the marrow in her bones. She saw him in the treeline, moving like smoke, arrow-notched, bow taut. He loosed one. A man screamed. Another shot fired. A horse bolted past, riderless. Mary ducked low, grabbed Griggs' rifle, and turned it over in her hands. She had fired one once years ago. Jed said it was a parlor trick for city girls. But Mary was done listening to Jed. She found cover behind a boulder and steadied the barrel. Jed appeared in the clearing, barking orders, rifle over his shoulder. He moved with false confidence, like someone who thought he couldn't bleed. Mary took a breath. Then another. Then squeezed the trigger. The shot went wide, striking a tree behind him. Jed flinched, turned, scanning. "Mary," he shouted, voice laced with disbelief. "That you?" She didn't answer. She fired again. This time the bullet grazed his thigh. He dropped, cursing, clutching his leg. "Goddamn woman," he roared. Tapaloo closed in. Jed turned, raised his weapon. Too slow. Tapaloo tackled him hard, sending them both crashing into the snow. They wrestled, grunting, blades flashing. Jed's strength was wild, desperate. But Tapaloo was precise, unrelenting. Mary watched, heart hammering, torn between fear and fury. Jed landed a punch to Tapaloo's jaw, broke free, and staggered up with his rifle. "Enough," he shouted. "She's mine. That baby's mine." "No," Mary said, stepping out of the trees. Jed whirled toward her, eyes wide. What the hell are you doing with these savages?" "I survived," she said. "Something you never taught me to do." He raised the rifle. Tapaloo was faster. The arrow struck Jed in the chest. He staggered, coughed, blood bubbling from his mouth. His eyes locked on Mary's, pleading. He dropped to his knees. She stepped closer. "You could have had a family," she said. "But you wanted ownership." He fell forward into the snow, face first. Still. The prairie was silent again, but it wasn't peace, it was aftermath. Smoke still rose from the scorched edge of camp. Bodies lay twisted in red-stained snow. But the worst of it, the terror, the threat, was over. Mary knelt beside Clara, who now lay wrapped in Tapaloo's cloak. Her daughter reached up, unfazed by the carnage, grabbing at the falling snowflakes with tiny fingers. Tapaloo stood beside her, blood on his shirt, but calm in his stance. "More will come," he said quietly. "I know," Mary replied. He looked at her. "We can't stay here." She nodded. They buried the dead that evening. Griggs, Jed, the others, wrapped and burned away from the camp. The Sioux dead were mourned in song and silence, names carried to the sky with smoke. Mary didn't cry. She was past tears. But when she placed Clara in Tapaloo's arms and watched him cradle the child as if she were his own blood, something inside her ached and healed at once. Later, when the stars had crept out and the embers glowed low, she sat beside the fire, staring at the rifle in her lap. "You killed for her," Tapaloo said. Mary met his eyes. "I'd do it again." He nodded. "You will have to." She didn't flinch. A new world was coming. One where women like her weren't silent, weren't property, weren't prey. One where a child born unwanted could grow strong. One where survival wasn't enough. It was time to ride west and make that world real. The trail was quiet. Not silent, never truly silent on the frontier, but the kind of quiet that hinted at danger waiting just beyond the next ridge. Crows circled high above, crying like omens. Hoof prints stretched in the dirt behind them, half frozen from the overnight frost. Mary rode at Tapaloo's side, her daughter wrapped close against her chest, both of them blanketed in buffalo hide. She had not spoken for nearly an hour, and neither had he. The weight of what they'd done, and what still waited ahead, pressed on them like the gray clouds forming overhead. A week had passed since the ambush. The Sioux camp had been relocated deeper into the forest, too exposed now to risk another assault. Mary and Tapaloo left not under orders, but because they both knew they couldn't stay. Not when the price of shelter was more blood spilled. The settlers wouldn't stop. Griggs was dead. Jed was buried beneath ice and regret. But others would come. Others who thought a woman was a thing to reclaim. Who thought a warrior's kindness was weakness. Who didn't yet understand what had been born that winter in the firelight and the scream of rifles. Mary wasn't running. She was preparing. Tapaloo rode ahead, gaze fixed on the valley that spilled out below. The land stretched in ochre and white, snow-laced pines, frozen rivers, and hills that looked like sleeping beasts. He pulled his horse to a halt and raised one hand. Smoke. Thin, spiraling, unnatural. He turned to her. There waiting. She didn't need to ask who. Word traveled fast out here. Griggs's boys had kin. Jed's friends drank with devils in town saloons. and a posse of self-righteous cowards could form quicker than a snowstorm. "How many?" she asked. "6. Maybe more. We don't surprise them." Mary looked at the child in her arms, sleeping without fear. She didn't tremble. Not anymore. Tapala dismounted. "We can go around. Lose them in the Black Hills." Mary followed him down. "No." He studied her. The lines in her face were sharper now. Not hard, but shaped. By pain. By purpose. She wasn't the woman he found in the snow. Not a settler's wife. Not a refugee. "You want to face them." "I want them to understand," she said. "I'm not prey." They made camp under the rise, behind a crooked wall of boulders. Tapaloo led the horses into a thicket and tied them low. Mary fed Clara, then laid her beside the fire in a shallow bed of moss and fur. She strapped her knife to her hip and checked the weight of the rifle she'd taken from Griggs. Tapaloo watched in silence, as one warrior does another. No pity. No hesitation. "You shoot better than you stab," he said, almost a smile. She gave him a look. "I was new to stabbing." Night fell with the slow cruelty of a snake coiling. The posse arrived before dawn. Lanterns bobbing. Horses snorting in the cold. Their laughter carried too far, like men who believed themselves invincible. Mary crouched behind the rocks, the cold seeping into her bones. Her breath was slow, heart steady. She could see their faces as they drew close. Rough men, not strangers. Men who'd leered at her in town when Jed wasn't looking. Men who never called her by name, just girl or darlin'. Now they called her thief and whore and Indian lover, spitting the words like venom. "She's just up ahead," one said, pointing. "Tapala won't run far with that brat in tow." "I want the girl alive," another barked. "Jed's brother says she's his now. Property." Mary stood. The rifle rose with her. The first shot ripped through the air, snapping a lantern into sparks. Flames burst, blinding the men. She moved before the echo faded, circling wide, firing again. A man fell, screaming, blood spraying against packed snow. Tapaloo launched from the brush, bow singing. One, two men dropped, arrows buried in their throats. Another stumbled back, trying to mount his horse. Mary tackled him from behind, knife drawn. This time, she didn't hesitate. She drove it deep into his side and twisted. He fell, gasping for a mother who wasn't coming. A rifle cracked. Tapala spun and dropped to one knee, pain flashing across his face. He shouted something in Lakota Mary couldn't understand. She rolled behind a log, reloading. A man charged her from the left. Mary shot him through the chest mid-run. He fell without a sound. The smoke stung her eyes. Somewhere, Clara cried out. Mary ran. A settler stepped in her path, big, red-bearded, swinging a club. She ducked. He roared, lunged. She used his momentum against him, slamming the rifle, but into his jaw. He reeled. She grabbed his pistol from his belt and fired point-blank. Blood sprayed across the snow. Mary reached Clara just as another man tried to grab the child. She didn't think, just aimed and shot. He flew backward, hit the tree trunk, slid down with a blank stare. Clara screamed louder, but she was safe. Tapaloo limped to her side, face streaked with blood and sweat. His bow was gone, but his tomahawk remained. One man stood left, Jed's brother, face twisted in rage and something fouler. "You think you've won, you bitch?" he spat, raising his gun. "You think this ends with you breathing?" Mary stepped forward, no fear in her bones, only ice. "No," she said. "It ends with you remembering my face in hell." She shot him once, in the heart. He crumpled. And just like that, the prairie was quiet again. Birds stirred. Wind returned. Fire crackled in a tree where lantern oil had spilled. And Mary stood in the center of it all, breathing hard, staring at the blood-soaked ground. Tapaloo fell to one knee. Mary rushed to him, helping him sit. His leg was torn, but not fatal. He grunted, pain flaring in his eyes. "They're gone," she whispered. He nodded. "You fought well." She looked down at her hands, red and shaking. "I didn't feel like myself. You were more than yourself." They buried the bodies. Mary said no prayers. The wind was enough. Later, when the sun finally dared rise, She sat with Clara on her lap and watched the light sweep across the charred trees. Tapaloo sat beside her, his hand resting on hers. "You have no home to return to," he said. Mary looked at the horizon. "That's the point. I'm not returning. I'm making something new." They rode for the Black Hills by noon. The snow began to melt by evening. Along the way, she saw signs of spring, buds forming, rivers thawing. Life pushing forward, not waiting for permission. A cabin would rise in the valley someday. One built by hands that had burned the old world down. Tapaloo would teach Clara how to hunt. Mary would teach her how to fight. And when the girl asked why the world feared her mother, Mary would tell her about blood and fire, and the night a legend was born in the dark. Not because she was chosen, but because no one chose her, and she chose herself. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because out here on the frontier, every voice counts.